So I've always had an idea of what a state machine is, but I've never really worked directly with them. And so this has been a lot of fun for me. I know someone out there is going to be like, oh dude, that's old news, but whatever, dude, it's news to me. So I grabbed his XState library, which is pretty cool. And it all starts with a chart. So over here I've got this chart that I then threw into a tool that David made that shows a big nasty workflow. All right, so we start over here, and we're going to fetch workshop data. This is the checkout flow on our website that I'm making some improvements to. And if we get an error, then we go into this state, and then if we try again, we come back here. If we get success, we ask for how many tickets you want. When you submit how many tickets you want, then we move over into this sub flow here, get the payment details. We go to Stripe, get a token. If there's an error, we show that screen, yada yada. If we get a success, we process the purchase, and then the purchase is complete. And then from there, we're going to get a register students action, which moves us into this flow. So you'll get a form to register the students. If you submit it, you can review it. If you want to change it, we'll come back here, etc. Pretty cool until we're eventually done here, and we're done with the entire flow. So I'm going to come over here and see what it's like. So let's reload this. It's fetching the workshop data. And then I can change the quantity here. I go next to the payment details. Get this stuff from Stripe. And now we're processing payment. The purchase is complete. Now we're going to register students. So you can see so far what we've done is we fetched the workshop data. We had success. We entered the number of tickets. Came over here, we got the Stripe token, it was a success, we processed the purchase, it was a success, so we're here in purchase complete now. We got this button, register students, so that's going to bring us down into this flow. So if I click register students, we've got the information there. Register, I can review. No, that's wrong, so I'm going to make some changes. So what just happened there is review. I didn't like it. I submitted a change event. I didn't submit a change event. I transitioned with a change event. And so I'm going to be back here, and then we'll approve it, and then we'll be done. So let's register. Looks good. All right. And then we can click buy more tickets, and away we go. So I wrote some funny code to do all this. So it starts with the chart, and this just describes everything for the entire flow. And then there was some state I needed to keep track of, like this quantity. If I have two people here, you'll see, give me a sec, that on this page, register students, I actually need two of these. So I've got to keep track of stuff like the quantity and the Stripe token because I use that later. So all of this state is kind of state that's floating around kind of outside of this. Kind of over all of it, there's some state sitting around out here that I might want to display in any one of these screens. Like the quantity. The quantity shows up all over the place, or the student data. That's when I get the student data from the registration form. I need it to review it, and I also need it to process it. So there's not just like what state is the app in, there's the app state as well. And so I've used, I borrowed some stuff from Redux for this. Didn't actually use Redux, but the idea is from Redux. So we've got this default state here, made a reducer. And this reducer is going to use the default state there, and it's going to get actions. So both Redux and state machines have this concept of an action. right? Every single one of these, every single one of these state transitions is an action. We're going to start over, we're going to cancel, we're going to have success there. So both of them have that same model. So what I did is I added in the state of the state machine and then the action that came through in that state. And then it's just normal Redux stuff. You return your state with the new stuff. So when a success comes through on fetching workshops, the data that comes through is the workshop data, and so I return that out of this reducer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The only really interesting one is start over. We take all the default state, but we hang on to the workshop data. Yeah, and then down here is the whole app. So here's the purchase machine. It got a workshop from somewhere else in the app. So I render a finite machine. I've got log true, so I get some debug logging, but that's not needed. You can see all the logs right down here, showing me which action's coming through and what data came with it. Yeah. So we give it a chart. That's our chart that we use to draw this pretty picture. Just a JSON object. And then we give it the reducer to keep track of that state that's floating around. Give it a render, and then it gives us the machine. So the machine has state, and it has transition. So the state is the state that we're in. Transition is how we get to a new state. And then data is the data that's floating around in that reducer. So we got this little progress bar. We pass the machine state. That's this thing that makes this stuff red. Come and look at this kind of ugly code. Excuse me. So I just pass in that machine state, and I can say, okay, purchase tickets. The color should be red if it starts with tickets. Color should be red if this one starts with payment details. Because I could be in any spot in this flow. So these machine states will be payment details dot get stripe token error, process purchase error. So all those will start with that. So I want that thing to be red no matter what part of that flow I'm in. Yeah, same thing. So register attendees, that's where we're at right now. So that's not super interesting, just some basic branching. Now, all of a sudden, this thing looks like React Router. We've got a switch. We give it the machine. Now I've got match, which is a lot like route. And so I say match this state. And if the machine right here matches that state, then we're going to render. And then we'll get the machine inside of here too, inside of the render prop. And I'll fetch the workshop data. So this component is unaware of the state machine completely. It just receives props and then calls up when things happen. And then out here, where I'm actually rendering this machine, I have this transition function to transition to a new state. So you just transition with the action, success, and then the action that comes through. Let's reload this and watch it happen. So purchase is the name of the chart or the machine, fetching workshop data dot success. So when you transition with a success action, the action that comes into the reducer is the state of the machine plus the action. Then you can send that data along, and then that data will go into the reducer. And of course on error as well. And so now we've just got match this state, render that. Match this state, render this component. Match this state, render this component. And now you can see this data is starting to accumulate because I need to pass the quantity into these things. So for example, we can say, let's get 3 tickets in here, and then we cancel this. What's going to happen is here in get stripe token, on cancel, we're going to transition to cancel. So let's come over here and look at what'll happen there. So we come and look at our chart, which by the way, again, was written, this chart was created by our code. We're using the same chart. So it's not like going to get out of date because they're the same thing. So if we try to get the Stripe token and we send a cancel, there it is. So we are in tickets, we submit the number of tickets we want, and then out of the Stripe token we get a cancel action. So we're going to come right back here to tickets. So back in tickets, and this is cool, we still have our data because we passed in a default quantity, and we get that quantity from our data, which comes in from render, which comes from match, which was rendered by switch, which got that data from our reducer. This is a lot of fun too right there. So what does that thing look like? That's the big question, right? So a finite machine makes a machine out of this.props.chart, keeps some state, its data, uses the reducer, and then asks the machine what its initial state is. The transition method is all right here. So it figures out what is the next machine state. So this.machine you call transition with the current machine state. This is a pure function. So you give it the current state and then an action, and then it will look at this chart and decide, okay, we're at tickets and you said submit, so we should go into the payment details state. Or if we were fetching workshop data and we got error, then we know to go into the fetching workshop data error state. And you can see that in the chart up here. Fetching workshops, on success, go to tickets. Come down here to tickets. On submit, go to payment details. Payment details. Once we enter here, it has some substates, so our initial is going to be get Stripe token. So we come here to get Stripe token. On success, go to processing purchase. You get it. And then we come up with an action to send to the reducer. So we give it the current data, where am I from? The next state, and then the action type. For logging, we'll log that information. We set our state from whatever the reducer wanted, and our machine state. If we're logging, then we give it a callback so we can see what the new state is. And then render is just saying, here's the state of the machine. Here is the data that we're keeping track of from the reducer. And here is how to transition so we can change the state of the app. Match is pretty much exactly like React Router route, except for instead of exact, it's partial. And instead of a children prop, we do a conditional. This is likely going to be the V5 API of React Router, but anyway, those two props anyway. And then rendering is pretty much the same. It just says, hey, did I match that state? If we're conditionally rendering, then we check if we have a match, if we got a render prop, or we got a component prop. If we're not conditionally rendering, then did we get a render prop? Yes. Otherwise, render the component. And then switch is pretty simple too. It just takes in the machine, iterates over the children, because its children are a bunch of matches. And if the thing matches, then we're just going to render that. So we just pick one of them, exactly like switch in React Router. And then export them. No context craziness, we're just anticipating that you have to pass in a machine to both of these components. Instead of getting it from context, get it from props. But yeah, that's it. So you've got a chart to describe how you move from one state to another and which states there are. And then you have a reducer to co-locate all of your changes to the data floating around the app. And then you have a React Router style components to decide what to render in response to different states. I had a blast building this. Thank you, David.